Welcome to Some Things Considered, the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. I'm an author. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I run the nonprofit 1455 Lit Arts. For more about me and what I do, check out seanmurphy.net. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we celebrate creativity. We love to talk about story, and nothing pleases me more than finding interesting people who I can talk to about craft and what makes them tick. So I typically and genuinely say today's no exception, but I can say today is no exception. I want to stand up and be counted as an OG fan of Stephen Marche. My relationship with his writing goes back to the day when we actually got magazines in the mail and read them and used the Cologne inserts. So having been a fan of his and his writing, I've since read some of his books, and I implored him to come chat with me. I'm super psyched to have him here today. Let me read you his bio so you can see what we're dealing with here and why I'm so excited. Stephen is a novelist, essayist, and author of, among many other works, On Writing and Failure and The Next Civil War. He's written features and essays for The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Atlantic, the aforementioned Esquire, and many others. His most recent novel, The Last Election, was co-written with Andrew Yang. Greetings to my friend north of the border, Stephen. Thanks for being here.
How are you? Pleasure to be with you.
I'm good, man. Like I said, I'm an OG fan. I feel like I need to say that just to contextualize not only why I'm grateful that you're joining me today, but you are and have been one of my, favorite cultural commentators. And I think that's kind of the through line of the work you do. And there's an interesting side angle because you're such a perceptive observer of America, and oftentimes, or at least some of the times, it is coming from Canada. So we can maybe chop up a little bit about how that vantage point has informed your ability to kind of see through some of the smoke
Sure.
that my
Yeah.
countrymen have a harder time grappling.
There's a lot of us. There's a lot of Canadian observers. There's Malcolm
But
Gladwell. There's the editor
talk
of
a little
Vanity
bit about
Fair.
the fact that you have spent time in America, obviously you've lived, but you're
hmm
you're a Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think being a Canadian is sort of like having the front row seat to the circus. I mean, you're kind of pressed up against the glass of the United States. I lived there briefly. I taught at City College in New York, which I loved. And of course I was a columnist at Esquire for 8 years. So I was, like most of my professional life is in New York. And so like it's funny because as a Canadian, you're both I can walk into anywhere in America and everyone would assume that I'm one of them, but I'm very much not one, right? And that means that it kind of gives you a little, it's a
Right.
perfect way to be a spy, if you will, right? Like, and also, like there's a kind of kinship relationship between America and Canada. I mean, like I have my Trump voting cousin in Seattle and, and I've been everywhere in America and like, and I have lots of friends there. So, it's a very close relationship, but there's still a kind of distance. Like you still know, like okay, that's totally insane. There's no reason for you to live that way. Like that kind of stuff becomes very clear when you're a Canadian.
Well, so one
Yeah.
of the things that I wanted to get your thoughts on are that again, I mean, I'm a political I live and grew up right outside of DC, so I mean I was
Mm.
born into it, a political animal. Recent events every 4 years, I hope and think. In addition to saving the planet, I think maybe if sanity prevails, I'll be able to spend less time. That has not turned out to be the case, but over the years, in addition to the wide array of writers and commentators that I enjoy, some of the most astute commentators have not been American born. I think of Christopher Hitchens and Martin Amis,
Right.
who to
Yeah.
me just had America in their sights, but they loved America. Not that that's
Yeah.
neither here nor there, but I mean they spent time here,
No,
they
I do
lived
too.
here.
Yeah.
And then yourself. you wrote a book called The Next Civil War. Doesn't by no means, of course, you can and should write a book like that. But to me, there's a little bit of wonderful irony that it is someone from Canada who has written probably the most upsetting and on point book I've read about kind of our current travails.
Well, I think when you know, like one thing you know when you're a Canadian in America is that the problem is not the people, right? Like, because the people are the same. The people in America are not different from the people in Canada, right? Like they're basically they're very very similar. In like genealogically, they're very similar, right? Like it's the
Right.
same people often.
Yeah.
And so you realize it's very clear that the problem is systems. And of course, that's what the next civil war is about, where you just like,
Yeah.
and also the last election, where like I did get a privileged view into all of these systems, and they're in very rapid decay and
Yeah.
tending towards violence. And so that kind of perspective is very clarifying, because I think if you're an American, you're automatically caught up in it, right? And the tendency is to think, if only XYZ gets elected, if only then it'll all be redeemed and it'll all be okay. And it's like, well, no, it's not, because it's not actually the people anymore. It's the system
That's
that's
right.
in breakdown.
That's right. And I think that's one of the key takeaways. The other one, which we could go down the rabbit hole, is what looked like a little bit of a kind of a prescient, this could be a dystopia. Now it just looks like notes taken from an ongoing implosion. We can talk
Yeah,
about that, but since you mentioned the system, as an American who has followed these things, where I immediately go is if someone were to ask me, so what has changed? And I would say it's been the acceleration of a very successful message that's meant to divide. There's always been that
yeah,
undercurrent, right? There's always been cynical operators who understand divide and conquer, but I would think starting with Fox and then social media has just poured gasoline. But
yeah,
coming from a perspective of story, without wanting to get too cute about it, but story
yeah.
and narrative, this idea of how has this succeeded? And I think there is a very vested interest that is telling a story very powerfully and effectively. The fact that it isn't true is almost beside the point.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I mean, another way to look at it that's more tragic, that well, I mean, talking with Andrew Yang, like where he gave me access to his entire political staff and all the
Yeah,
realm of consultants and everything. I mean, they are in the entertainment business, right? Like,
yeah,
that is the business that they are in. They're in the business of monetizing attention, right? And like that's why you never, like, American politicians never resign. In Canada, politicians resign all the time. It's considered perfectly normal, for you to resign on principle, and also
yeah,
like no one thinks less of you,
yeah,
and it doesn't mean the end of your career. Often it means like 5 years later, we all know that you have integrity, so you can come
right,
back, right?
right,
There's just it's really the incentive system, and the entertainment force
yeah,
of attention and money in American politics that are sort of spearheading the chaos. But I
yeah,
mean, to me, what's really tragic about it is that it's exactly the things that are so beautiful about America. Its openness, the fact that you really are entitled to your own understanding of the world, right?
yeah,
You if you want to make your own religion, you go right ahead and do that. And that leads to Mormonism, and it leads to Bob Dylan, and it leads to hip hop, and it leads to this creative explosion. And that
yeah,
has now soured. That has become the tragic flaw, is that
yeah,
like it has just dissolved into incoherence. And
yeah,
similarly, like the thing that was so unique about America, which was its capacity to hold contradictions in tension, right?
yeah,
The capacity to have this, out of many one is one way of putting it, but
yeah,
like really, it's like, it's this country that's obsessed with law and order that nonetheless lets everybody have a gun. It's this country that's obsessed with freedom that nonetheless, it jails, imprisons, like, basically a quarter of the world's prisoners are in America,
yeah,
right? It's this country that is very earthy and very populist and very popular minded, but also has the great elite institutions at its core. There were all of these incredible contradictions. And once again, like that tension, which was so productive for America. And
Yes.
I mean, not just in terms of money, but and in
Yep.
terms of power, but in
Yep.
terms of like it's just capacity to generate ideas and meaning, and explosive new phenomena. That's
Yeah.
also that's also consumed itself
Yeah.
in fire. Now let's all pray that it comes back, but
Yeah.
it's very hard to get these things back when they're gone.
That's right. That's right. I think what you just hit the nail on, right, is all of these inherent tensions and contradictions spur creativity.
Yeah,
When the creativity, when that vacuum is filled with nihilism, that's where I think we get into, a really tricky territory. I
yeah,
listening to you talk and reading your book, and just being obsessed with this stuff. One of the other things I think it's pretty simple observation, but there did used to be, it was all part of the game, right? Politics is a
yeah.
game, it's entertainment, but there was a consensus on reality. There was a tendency to agree you can't do X and hope that the sky turns green. Like both parties could agree to disagree and then go have drinks after. And then
Yeah. Well, also there was a sense that the system mattered more than your individual career, and that
yeah,
the system mattered, and that the country mattered more than your party, and
right.
that it was all about like that's why the Republican Congress voted to oust Nixon because they thought the system
That's
was
right.
in jeopardy, right? And now everyone assumes the system is already dead, so they're just they're like vultures feasting on the corpse, right? And everyone when
Yeah.
you have someone like Dan Bongino, I mean, he has that amazing line this week. I mean, it's hard to keep up with the news where he had this amazing line where someone was like, "Well, you pushed this conspiracy theory, and now you're saying it's not true." And he's like, well, I was an entertainer then, and now like it's like right. So you never had the
Yeah.
interests of truth
Yeah.
in mind. And I think even if you look at the most conservative of conservatives in the '60s, the open racists, like they did not lack a belief that they were actually right, right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's a big difference.
It's a huge difference. And I think somebody saying that even 10 years ago would have understandably been concerned. Now I'm offending. Now I'm offending Americans by saying, yeah, I said that stuff before, but I was just playing around. It's like other people's whole ideologies and the
You
the
know,
the the, the cults they've joined have been the foundation of the things you were spewing.
yeah,
The shame went out the window, but the thing that
yeah.
I keep coming back to, and again, since you brought it up, I think we can. You specifically said the whole out of many one. Grow as a kid, even so, even in the late 20th century, that was still the prevailing, even if it was a myth, right? Like the American dream, like these mythical aspirational stories. That was the story we chose to tell about ourselves.
Oh, it wasn't
Even
mythical. I
right.
mean, it wasn't mythical.
Yeah.
The American society between 1945 and 1980 was, I mean, you can read Thomas Piketty's Ideology and Capital. That's the only society in human history where you could work your way to wealth. That was the like right,
Yeah.
and it was very brief, and it was only in a few countries in the West that happened, but
Yeah.
like that created an egalitarianism and a spirit of like, and I think in some sense that survived even till very recently. Like when
Yes.
you come from London to Washington, the thing that you notice first is that the cab driver talks to you like a just your guys, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like he's not worse than you. He doesn't think he's worse than you. He doesn't think
Yeah.
he's subservient.
Right.
And even in a country like Canada, which is very egalitarian, it's a frontier country too, right? Like
Sure.
it's a farming, and it came out of frontier mentality, which engenders that egalitarianism.
Yeah.
Um, it was even here you can feel it when you move to America. And
Yeah.
of course, the inequality numbers are now just so like they're higher than they've been at any since American society was more equal in
Yeah.
1776 than it is now, right?
Yeah.
So like we're really into territories that the conditions of the 20th century are just no longer recognizable.
Right, right. And so what Stephen, what I come back to, because again, I'm internally fast forwarding us only because I want to selfishly linger on there's already meat on
Right.
that bone I want to keep chewing on. But
Yeah.
for me, what it comes down to is if we could all agree, like, okay, so everything's fucked up and it's hopeless and social media has made it impossible. But to me, the impetus now is on progressives, or even just call them, people that are still tethered to the sane world. How do we tell better stories? Is there opportunity here to make lemonade of some sort by saying, now we know what the game is. We're not competing on fact-based initiatives. We're not competing on the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
How do people that have truth on their side, which used to kind of get you through, if you don't have truth on your side, is there a way to tell better stories? Because look, as an American, I'll say the Democrats have historically been congenitally feckless and unable to tell stories with the passion and get people in the feels, as we say here.
I don't know. See, I mean, to me, um, you know, there's a sort of horse race politics aspect to this. Like, I mean, you go into the New York Times and you read Frank Bruni, and he says, the Democrats need a charismatic centrist, and it's like, no, what you need are open primaries. Like,
Yeah,
the things that you're facing now are, and I think genuinely the hope it is that everyone on all sides understands that the system is totally broken,
yeah,
and that if it is allowed to continue down the road that it's going on to, it used to be that political violence in the United States was when I published the book, political
yeah,
violence in the United States was right wing phenomenon,
yeah.
and like it was like 56% was right wing and 4% was left wing. Left wing is catching up very fast. Like
Okay.
their capacities for political violence are growing, and their will to do it, and they're I mean they're doing it.
Yeah.
Like that is not a country you want to raise children in, right? Like
Right.
that's like
Right.
there's no like a country where violence is actually determining the political outcomes. I mean, that's just not that's just not that's a place to flee, right?
Yes.
And so like I think there are many things that can be done to take the temperature down. Like there's like obviously in the book there are things like breaking up into four countries and like and a constitutional Congress, and like I do believe all of those things are necessary, but
Yeah.
with open primaries. But like rather than starting with open primaries, you have Texas and California turning themselves into single state parties
Yes.
forever, right?
Yes.
And that makes all of these, and that comes back to the question of incentives. So like I don't actually think it's a problem. I
Okay.
think it's really a sense of like the incentives have become so skewed that
Right.
and also like you do have this just endemic decline of faith in institutions where institutions have failed
Yeah.
to tell their story. I mean, look at the Supreme Court. Like it's basically allowed its um just collapse,
Yeah.
and therefore nobody really believes it's a legitimate
Right.
institution anymore. That's in the right and left, right?
Yeah.
And it's treated as spoils of partisan conflict.
Right.
That's not an effective system. Like that's not a system anyone wants to live in.
Right. Well, I would say it's a system that the 1% wants to live in. I think
Yeah.
I think a lot I would gently push back and just say everything you're saying, I'm on board with, but I feel that it's even more cynical than that, that I do believe that both sides broadly think the system's broken, but one party is pinning the blame successfully on all the wrong things, and the party that actually has things that could fix some of these inherent and very purposefully engineered flaws and inequities are successfully continuing to blame immigrants, continuing to
Yeah.
blame, recipients of aid when you look at red states and go, these are the people that get the most aid. That's what I mean, I guess, when I say,
Oh yeah.
how do we tell better stories to get people to understand? Like, it is the guy behind the curtain. We are more on the same side than those guys. That starts to become a class issue, which that's maybe the only observation I'd make as an American is that the UK and maybe Canada. I don't know enough about Canadian politics,
Yeah,
but UK is very sensitive to class issues and it resonates.
right.
Here, we think we're above that. So somehow that
Yeah,
never
yeah,
penetrates, which is, I think, why Bernie, Sanders continues to resonate with young people because the young people see through the horse shit and say it's a class issue.
yeah.
The rich
Well,
have
see,
all the power and we don't have
yeah.
anything.
Although there are some, I mean, I think Democrats are really not Bernie. The Democrats who are not part of the left, like not the Mamdani,
Yep.
not the Bernie Sanders Democrats. They're really institutionalists, and they
Yep.
want to do everything to keep the institutions alive.
Yep.
And they still operate. Chuck Schumer is fully under the operation that all of this is going to go away, and it's going to
Yes.
go back to the way it was in 1996. And he's going to be the senator from New York in a Senate that is the same, the glorious institution it's always been.
Yep.
Um, Sanders and Mamdani know better, but the whole of the Republican Party has really figured out that the system is broken. And so what you're essentially doing is selling revenge on it to
Yep.
people,
Yep.
which they, I mean, the number one correlate for Trump voting in 2016 was being in a state of physical pain, right? Like that, like if you look at county by county information of like
Yep.
people who are in
Yep.
physical pain, they vote for Trump on a whole other level. You were
Yep.
saying like it's in the interest of the 1%. There's actually a really interesting research about that. That there's a certain moment where the Gini coefficient, which is how they measure inequality, when it passes by that, it's called the Robin Hood moment, and
Mhm.
that's when it becomes worse to become a rich person. Right? So like in Canada, it's very nice to be a rich person because there are no really gated communities here. You're all walking around. Everyone's got the same health care. So you're not your kids are all going to the same university. So even if you're
Yeah.
making shit tons of money more than the next person, you're
Yeah.
fundamentally a citizen among other citizens. And
Yeah.
people just think, oh, he did great. He made a lot of money. If
Yeah.
you're behind, if you need security to walk around like you do in Brazil, like you do increasingly in cities in the United States, or in
Yes.
like when the Gini coefficient hits a point, that's no way to
Yeah.
live, right? Like that's like so like it's actually
Yeah.
not really in anyone's interest, right? Like it's just a system that's gone haywire, right?
Right.
And I think what needs to happen. I mean, the reason I wrote the book is like don't stop hoping for some another Obama, right? Stop hoping for like some magical figure who's going to come along and save you. What you need are like reforms to the reforms to the system. Still there?
To the outsiders, the artists, the poets, etc., the creatives to bring these truths home. What scares me and depresses me is that there's again also a very systematic, very deliberate defunding of the arts, defunding
Yeah.
of public education. Um, if there
Yes.
aren't people able to inspire hope, because I take your point and I agree. Obama was the best thing that happened to Democrats, and in some ways,
Yeah.
right, was the worst thing because we're not going to recapture that lightning in a bottle. And we shouldn't hope for that. We shouldn't hope that one person could change everything.
Right.
And
But
I think that
that's
gets back
that's
to your
kind of
earlier
in the
point about
nature
entertainment.
of yeah, it's
We
kind of
want to
in
be
the nature
entertained.
of America, right? Like America loves the superstar, right? But yeah, I mean, and I think like also
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
when you see these like arts, of course, is like basically not responded to this moment with anything like the kind of subtlety and well, the novelty's just been overwhelming, right? And like
Yeah.
and it's very hard to adjust to it. But yeah, I think like the narrative dimension of this is actually pretty interesting because what you fundamentally have on the right is that they've channeled um, the maximized celebrity culture, right?
Yeah.
They've actually taken the narrative systems of reality television, the Instagram influencer. I mean, you have Christine Noemi who's out there posing with gang members in prison in El Salvador, like
Yeah.
an influencer with sunflowers behind
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
Like it and Hegseth's out there saying kill them all because that's
Yeah.
what he saw people say in movies in the 80s,
That's right.
right? So
Yeah.
the entertainment system, I mean, I actually wrote a piece for The Atlantic where I called it historiocracy, like rule by actors. But it's ruled by like essentially it's WWE
Yes.
narrative systems, and of
Yep.
course that works. Like it's incredibly good at that, you know?
It's really it's the apotheosis of America's entertainment obsession. It's the people,
Yeah,
and I mean Trump's made no bones about it, right? He wants people
right.
that look right for the role. Are they qualified? What that's like fifth in the list
Yeah,
of what plays well on TV. And again, that's the chickens, that's the narrative chickens coming home to roost, the lack of authenticity or the lack of
yeah.
insistence. And I guess I certainly don't want to belabor the point, but for me, when I think of better narrative, I think of simple things like you would say to an audience, do you want the plumber that has the best head of hair, or do you want the plumber that's fixed the most toilets working? Do you want the guy operating on your mom for cancer that has been to med school, or the guy that feels he did his own research? Like these things, even in a bifurcated America, most people agree expertise is generally a good thing. But for
Yeah.
some, in some perverse way, although I think it's very intentional, that's been flipped, and now the less authentic or the more authentic you seem, the actual expertise is really irrelevant. I think my hope lies in the fact that we'll reclaim, and there'll be a little bit of a recalibration, because otherwise I don't know if we can come back.
Well, I mean, some of these institutions have now been overwhelmed,
Yeah.
right? The CDC, I mean, they're being
Yeah.
replaced by blue state initiatives, like who are
Yeah.
creating their own. Like, it is interesting that like there was a report that came out today, like abortion has increased over the past 3 years, like since Dobbs, because like it's America. If they want to
Yeah.
get an abortion, if you want to get fentanyl, you're going to figure out how to get it. You think you're not going to be able to get a morning after pill if you want it? I mean, come on. The customer. Ever heard the expression "the customer's always right"? Like, they're on this, but like it's. Um, I mean, I've heard from journalists who do know that talent in the Trump administration is actually a counter, like he deliberately looks for people who are not talented, right? And that's actually a model of like in Japan where they do like where they have this massive celebrity culture called parentu or talent. That
Yeah.
actually means they don't look for good singers, right? They look for human people that you can associate with, right?
Right.
Because their voices aren't like they don't look for like a proper trained opera singer. They look for
Yeah.
someone who sounds like someone singing in their shower. And
Right.
essentially that's the Trump administration, right? It's like shower singers on center stage.
That's as good a mic drop, and as good
Right.
as I'll seize the opportunity. Although I will say, like respectfully and almost like regretfully, I want more, and maybe we can revert back to that after the
Sure.
midterms. But look,
Right.
I mean, my longstanding admiration of you, as I've stated, goes back, and you're cultural, but you wrote a slim but powerful, alternately depressing and exhilarating, which is that's not a lot of books you can genuinely say that about. I was completely flatlined and also laughing out loud, and at the end inspired and reminded why we do what we do. But talk a little bit about how you came as a successful writer, I'll say it, writing a book on failure and making the case, right? The thesis being writing is failure. Wow, what a depressing message. And yet,
Yeah. Well, I got Dan at Dan Wells at Biblioasis. He does this series of pamphlets,
yeah,
shorter books, and so I had a chance to write. He basically said write whatever you want at 20,000, which is
okay.
a unique kind of length, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
usually a nonfiction book is 60,000, or
yeah,
you're writing a feature story. Like a feature story is probably 5,000, but increasingly it's about 2,500. And
yeah,
like, a maximum would be 10,000 if you had like the biggest story in the world, right?
right.
And
Long
so it was
form.
a
Yeah.
different length. And I had kept a notebook of failures, like almost like a commonplace book of it,
Yeah.
because they made me feel better.
Yeah.
These stories, the stories in the book are just basically what I would go to remind myself of, because like I think it's very easy to be like, people are like, oh, she struggled for 10 years and then she got a big book deal and it made her life. That's like, those aren't helpful stories. Like
No.
that's not what this is like, right? This is not, if you're actually out here doing this work, like,
Yeah.
seriously trying to make meaning and like fight through the chaos of the industry that,
Yeah.
that's constantly churning. It's
Yeah.
really good to know that like Dostoevsky was completely fucked up by the same problems, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he had exactly the same problems. He had like, and they all did. And
Yeah.
actually most of them had it way worse than you. Like, like, and they fought through it because they had to fight through it. And it wasn't fun, but they did it. And
That's right.
like, and I mean, I think that's because that's actually like, it's not a very redemptive narrative. Like, it's not comforting. It's not like, but on the other hand, I actually find it much more comforting. It's like, this is
Totally.
the deal you've made,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Like, you want to do this, like, this is the deal that you've made. If you want to be involved in this, it's gonna suck for like a
Yeah.
lot of the time, and
Yeah.
much of it is unfair, and there's all these little cartels, and it's all like, and that's just the deal. And like deal with it and
Yeah.
stop whining. You do something insane, right?
You do something insane. It's always been thus, and I feel
Yeah,
like this book could have, should have, and in some different forms has been written 20, 30, 50 years ago. But I think it's particularly relevant now because I think people are making the mistake that because of industry consolidation and because of late stage capitalism, there are certainly factors that are turning the heat up and making it even more
yeah,
difficult. But you can always turn that around. And those of us that literally do remember an analog era, it's like one thing I say over and over again. Anyone that watches this podcast is probably rolling their eyes, but I say, look, it's more difficult than ever with all this amazing content or all this shitty content, whatever, however you look at it. But it's never been easier to get your work out there. And 30 years ago, if you couldn't get signed by a publisher,
yeah.
your
You're done.
masterpieces might languish in the footlocker. Now there
Oh,
are options. And so the reason I think your book is really important, Stephen, is it's a corrective for people that assume that this should make sense. And I feel like the musicians figured this out. I think streaming accelerated the acceptance, but
yeah.
I listen to more amazing music than ever, and it seems in the music is implicit I'm making weird, non-commercial music. I never had any illusions about making a living at this. And I think
Right.
when you talk about it being somehow conciliatory and somehow uplifting, I find uplift in that because if people continue to make this amazing music, knowing that 30 years ago they wouldn't have got signed by a major label, now there are no major labels signing
Right.
new jazz or
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about that. And I know that can be considered can be taken as extreme cynicism, like you're never going to make money. That I don't think that's what you're saying. It's certainly not what I'm saying, but it's
Oh no.
if you aren't doing it for the love of it, you are doing it for the wrong reasons.
Well, I do it for, I mean, I make a living at it, right?
Yeah,
And that is kind of a miracle of its own, in its own kind of way. But I think the point is really, it's always something. You got to serve somebody, as
yeah,
Bob Dylan said,
yeah,
right? Like, there's always, you got to serve somebody. Like,
yeah,
there's always some boss saying stupid shit to you. Like that's just the way of the world. Like that's
yeah,
it. And like, I don't know. There's this kind of feeling like, especially at universities, I find, because I'm more in the cut and slash world of journalism and stuff, where there's a lot more, there's a lot more. If something doesn't work out, you just move on to the next one, right? Like
yeah,
like if
yeah.
a relationship blows up, you just go to you find another one, right? It's kind of freeing. It's much freer in that way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And everything's temporary, right? Like the moment you sign a client, you're losing your client. I mean, it's capitalism, right? Like it's a real proper. I live in a state of pure capitalism, right? But like I think the point is really, if you're selling your feelings, it shouldn't be surprising that it's hard to make a living, right? Like it's hard to sell anything. Like,
that's right.
go and ask anyone. Like, it's hard to sell aluminum siding. It's hard to sell it's hard to sell stuff people need,
That's
right?
right.
So like, and nobody needs your feelings. right? So it's there's this kind of attitude like, why aren't I taken seriously? Why is it? And it's like, well, think about what you're doing for 5 minutes. I think
Right.
also like there has been a new thing now where, you know, like I do remember, I can just remember. I wasn't actually in this space, but I can remember people who like submitted the actual physical manuscript of a work to a publisher, and like it's very hard to get rejected a lot when you're doing that. Whereas what I do, I mean, I'm just getting rejected all the time. I don't even, it doesn't even register. Like it's like I'm just churning through it. And I mean, and so that's also changed. I think it's not it's the quantity of rejection.
Yeah.
It's much more open, as you say, but there's the quantity of rejection just expands. You
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah. And I think,
And we
you know,
have to
so
change so much, right? Like it's like suddenly there's
yeah.
a whole new order. Like suddenly it's like we have to do audio. Like if you don't do audio, like now I have to figure out how to do short form videos to promote books. Like, like it's just constant unremitting change. But
Yes.
that's our burden. That's the burden of this generation of writers. But
Yes.
it's always a burden. There's always some burden.
It's always a burden, and the reason, even though it's probably the most trite thing any author can say, the reason I mention the whole "you have to love it," I'm saying that just, if you do all the things, I think this is your point. If one genuinely, say one has a team, one has the money to hire
Yeah.
a team, do TikTok videos, do this, do
Yeah, yeah.
that, have my presence, do this, get these followers. It's
Yeah.
not guaranteed it's going to work, or it's not going to work
No.
for you. And in 6 months, that whole model might be different. And there are people writing books saying, no, 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 that was all wrong. This is what you do. The people that are gravitating toward those solutions, those are the people that I feel the evolutionary pack. Those aren't the real writers anyway. Um,
No. Well, the
and
biggest fan of this book by far is Margaret Atwood, right? I mean, and so like she's like a massive celebrity, right? Like
yeah.
she's like she's like a massive ass celebrity. I mean, in this
Mhm.
country, there's no one in America who can compare. Really, it's like Walt Whitman still around, right?
Yes.
Like it's like
Totally.
it's like a completely different thing, and
Yep.
she likes it because she feels like she's on the make all the time,
Right.
and her face is on a stamp,
Right.
right? Right, she's on the make. She feels like a hustler. Like I just had a book come out. How do I get some more engagement in Germany? It doesn't matter how big you get. Like
Yeah.
the size of your career makes no difference. It's just what changes is like where you're failing and the
That's right.
scale at which you can fail. But that's that's the achievement of having a successful career is that suddenly you're Jonathan Franzen being rejected for a television show rather than your
Yeah.
short story getting rejected by you know uh Queen's Quarterly or whatever. That's all that changes.
You were talking about Margaret Atwood. I was just going to
Yeah.
say, and it's perfect because a totally different trajectories. But I think of a million examples I could throw out of my favorite, successful people telling the truth.
Right.
I don't know, it was 10 years ago or so, but Stephen King was being interviewed. And yeah, I think it was after he won, some major award, but he was
Right.
really salty and naming names at critics that had gone after him. And it's like, look, and again, it's different than Margaret Atwood because she's culturally appreciated, yada, yada, literary fiction. But the
She did
fact
the
that
exact
he,
same thing in her memoir. It's
yeah,
her memoir is like people who fucked me over when I was in my 20s. Here you all are. Fuck you. I mean, it's
yeah,
crazy. Would you
it,
like get the chip off your shoulder, Margaret?
it,
They've given you all that you could get, I guess, except the Nobel Prize. But it's probably
yeah.
coming.
And even then, right?
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
didn't like the dress I wore to the ceremony. But the reason I love to invoke Stephen King is because the one thing I'll say to as I get older and when I talk to younger people, I say, look, I personally I don't read Stephen King like I used to when I was a kid.
right.
But the one thing no one can take away from that guy, he gets up and does the work. Is the work any
Oh
good? Who
yeah,
cares? And one of the themes in your book, which anyone that's written for any period of time knows is true, is the key word being perseverance.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's James Baldwin's advice. That's well, I think it becomes clear when you read literary biography that it's like, right, they just couldn't stop. Like, because what they went through was like, I mean, James Joyce is writing, his children he's unemployed, his children are hungry. He's like in this house that's falling apart. The kids are screaming. He's basically making a living doing the equivalent of like putting up, when you put up papers on telephone poles for like
Yeah.
guitar lessons. He's basically doing that for English lessons in Italy. That's how he's making a living with,
Yep.
like, but he's not really making a living. And,
Yep.
and so like, and, like, it is just funny to think that like Jane Austen never saw her name on a book,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Shakespeare, there are unproduced plays of Shakespeare that burned to the ground. Like he spent 6 months working on something, never saw the light of day,
That's right.
right?
That's
That's
right.
that's William Shakespeare, right? So
Right.
like it's
Right.
and the list goes on and on, right?
Yeah.
So
And I do think we can tie it into kind of what we were talking about with politics and narrative. Like our two of the most celebrated books, one from each century, Moby Dick and Great Gatsby. Both those
yeah,
writers died poor, unappreciated. Their books failures. How
Melville was the
dare
worst.
how dare any writer have the audacity to think it should be easy if or even successful?
I mean, most of these things, like even someone like Anna Akhmatov, who obviously suffered, it makes a lot of like she's living in Stalinist Russia, and it's very shitty.
Yeah,
Melville's like a torture from the gods. I mean, that's a very, very cruel existence that he had. Every book he writes better. Every book sells less. Every like he starts off writing a piece of crap that's like basically scenes from Polynesian life. I mean, it's like
yeah,
total, basically a postcard, a postcard collection, really.
yep,
That blows up, instant bestseller.
yep,
Then like Moby Dick, he goes into debt to publish it. And
yeah,
then Billy Budd doesn't get published at all. It doesn't get published until like, I mean, this is an extreme masterpiece. Very,
yep,
very cool. I mean, Gatsby, and he's an interesting case too, because he does show, F. Scott Fitzgerald, he does show like how much your own thinking of these things actually becomes the reality of it. I mean, he was so consciously a failure in his
yeah,
own mind. I mean, he's going around all these parties. I mean,
yeah,
like showing everyone his small dick. Like, basically didn't even have to ask. Like, he's like, there's the first thing he does when he meets
yeah,
people is like, look how I'm incapable of satisfying my wife. Like, this is like his hobby is
yeah,
doing this. Like, and he's drunk. I mean, he's drunk. Like, it's not like raucous drunkenness. It's like
yeah,
he's passed out in a corner in at the dinner party, right?
yep,
Like slumped in
yep,
the corner, right? And
yep,
then so but he'd written these massive bestsellers, right?
yep,
He's got the best gig in America available at the time, writing
right,
short stories for Saturday Evening Post. I mean,
right,
that's the top gig, right? Like,
yeah,
like that's
yeah,
and so and then he meets Hemingway. Hemingway's published nothing. Hemingway thinks he's the shit, you know, and Hemingway's like looking, Hemingway sold nothing.
yeah,
F. Scott Fitzgerald has written stories of the jazz age, right?
right,
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And
yeah.
and they meet, and it's like Hemingway is giving him advice about how to be a writer. I mean, it's hilarious.
It is, and you know what it makes me think of? There's a great scene from the movie Bull Durham where after all
Yeah,
they've been through, Nuke LaLoosh gets called up to the majors, and Costner, gives him the best advice and says, "There's, when you first get there, they're gonna be hitting the shit out of you. They're gonna be knocking
yeah,
everything out." At cocky and arrogant, he's like, That's a good line, but what takes it to
yeah.
transcendence to me is he says, "That's the secret." Like he gives him the
What
advice,
what
like,
is the
"Don't."
exact line? It's
I
arrogant, and what is it? It's a
oh
classic line.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Arrogant,
Fear and arrogance.
fear. Yeah, but he does say, like, I mean, that is a great movie about failure. I mean, that's one of
Yeah,
the. I mean, that's the baseball. Like, my book is an attempt to be the writing equivalent of Bull Durham, right? I mean, because I mean, there's that speech in Bull Durham where he's like, "Do you know what the difference between a 250 hitter and a 300 hitter is? It's one flare a week, right?
yeah,
It's like, and so you're
yeah,
out there chasing that one flare a week,
yeah,
it could be luck, but it's actually just something you don't really understand about your own abilities and your
yeah,
own in your own capacities, and you're out there chasing it, and that's all. That's
yeah.
that's the difference between, as he says, that's the difference between being in Boulder and playing in Yankee Stadium, right? Like
Right, right,
it's and then you've got like Nuke, who really doesn't like the game, but is just given
right.
it. It's just
Yep,
it's just it's
yep,
just like a gift, and then him who loves it. And which one is the
yeah.
real baseball player? Yeah, I mean, that that's is a film like when you talk about like the America that used to be that was so lovable.
Yeah.
That that is a film that represents it. I mean, high low tensions. This beautiful this beautiful portrait of masculinity that was vulnerable, right? Like, but also very
Yeah.
confident. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, it's gone, but it was. I love that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second best sports movie, I think. I think Slapshot's actually slightly better, but
And there we go. We had to make sure we worked in hockey, although that
one
doesn't take
hockey
place in
reference,
Canada. I mean, there's got to be
right?
at least one hockey reference. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to the wisdom that you dropped today and in this book, which I mean, if you're a writer, I'm going to put this on when we do the recap. You've got to get a copy of this. But I think thinking back to when I was a grad student, they whether they knew and were just letting us off easily, but it used to be, you might need a day job to fall back on. And what I would
Uh,
tell young people now is get a day job, hopefully something that's meaningful that doesn't destroy you, but you need the stability to create good art. And I think a myth that is hurt a lot of aspiring writers is that you have to be living on the edge and the flash of inspiration will save you. And
oh
if
yeah,
you're blessed, the reality is you can't write consistently if you're not healthy, if you're not paying your bills. I mean, duh.
this
But
is work.
yeah,
Like
it's
if you want to
work.
do this, it's just work. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to play chess, you're not out there partying, right? If you want to do a high level intellectual activity, like you need to be quite conscious of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really think. I mean, I don't really give writing advice in the book, but I mean, when
Right.
we, because I don't think there's any pattern.
Right.
Some people everyone figures out their own way of doing it, and like,
Sure.
certainly people will tell you you need to like see the world. But there's lots of like Immanuel Kant never left from 5 minutes from his house, right? Like he
Right.
literally lived. He never went farther than 5 miles from his place of birth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no when you go through the history, there's no pattern, right?
Right.
It's not like it's like the writers come in all shapes and sizes. All I mean, that's the
That's right.
beauty of
That's
it,
the
right?
beauty of it.
That the beauty of it is that it really does connect everyone is all religion. Like there's
Yep.
always a great writer from somewhere, right?
Yes.
If you can name a place, there's always been one guy or one woman who like has written a true masterpiece, right? From that
Totally.
perspective, right? So,
Yeah.
so I don't give advice, but I do think we're in the '90s, like that was just a different world. Like
Yeah.
I think that was, I mean, I think that was, like the advice people gave me then were like, well, try and get a professorship, and it's like that was the fallback. That was
That's
like
right.
if you can't make it as a pro, like you could
That's
just
right.
go and get it, and anyone can go get an academic job, and then have a basic. I mean, now those are like Hunger Game appointments, right? I
That's
mean,
right.
now it's like I mean, yes, if you gather the crystal of Midorian and then and a sprig of Edelweiss from the highest Austrian mountain, and we might look at you for a job, right? So
Yep.
I mean, it has completely changed, and I do feel like even writers 5 years younger than me. Well, I mean, I say in the book, writers 5 years older than me have it way easier, and
Yeah.
writers 5 years younger than me have it way harder, right? I think it's like I think I was able to get in. I was able to buy a house,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's literally only possible because of the exact generational moment I was born, right? I was kind of the last of them. So
Right.
I
And
I
you say that throughout the book that
it's getting harder. Still there? See you. Yeah,
yep, still here.
yeah,
You mentioned throughout the book now is because it's probably going to get harder and not easier. And
definitely.
it's horrifying, but it is also kind of liberating.
Well, I mean, I think it's to me, it's a liberation is it's not supposed to be easy. And I think you get in these states where it's like,
Right.
oh, it's supposed to be it like, oh, if only I were like this or that, like that, um, or but it's always, there's always something. And like to make your voice heard,
There
I
is.
think is always a struggle. Is I mean, it's just always going to be a struggle, right? So like, and that's why I
Yeah,
really think that like
yeah,
whining is not the way to go here. It's because
right.
it is a
Yeah,
luxurious pastime. Like it is a like I mean, pastime's the wrong word,
that's right.
but like it is a you are involved in something that
Yeah,
is a gift to do.
that's right. That's right. To be aware of the struggle is to be blessed. Look at us.
Right.
We
Yeah.
get doesn't there's straight path to stoicism.
Yeah. Well, there's my mother's line, which is like, there's no bad hikes. There's just only unprepared hikers. Right. Like, if you know it's going to
Yeah,
be, you just have to know it's going to be shitty out when you set out. That makes it bearable. Right. and
right,
and like
right.
and I mean, you look at some of these histories, like it's like, and I mean, the thing was, I was sort of thinking, like, I'd kept these notes for years about like all the like as a commonplace book, but then when I sat down to
Yeah,
write the book, I was like, okay, I've got to research this, I got to figure out what actually happened. It's probably all exaggerated, like I probably have misunderstood, and like it's actually not as bad as it I thought it was. Way worse. In every case, it was like way worse than I thought. It was like, oh my God, they did what to him? Oh my God. Like,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So when we talk about the Gatsbys and the Melvilles, it's like to be in
yeah,
any way in that line of people who struggle to share something, it's a pretty beautiful thing. And I think
yeah,
it a lot of
yeah,
aspiring writers in the post-internet age need to kind of recalibrate. What are
yeah,
you doing it for? What do you hope to get out of it? And if the answer is money, knowing that that might not happen, do you still want to do it? And I think
exactly.
that's really where most people end up. Like, do
Yeah,
you still need to do it? Then you're a writer.
yeah. I did miss two of them. The stories have come in from other people. Like, well, like since I've written the book, people tell me other stories. And like Cormac McCarthy did not sell more than 5,000 copies of a book until he was 60. Right. So like I mean, he did not have a successful book. He did not have a book that was not an outright failure until he was 60. Right. And Zora Neale Hurston,
Jesus.
Their Eyes Are Watching God. She wrote her nonfiction is actually way
Of
better than her
course.
fiction. Amazing, amazing stuff. Watch The Horseman and stuff like that. She got significant grants in the 30s with the whatchamacallit project that FDR started, the folk project.
Yeah.
Like they sent her to
Yeah.
Haiti and they sent her to Jamaica to do this work, incredible work. I mean, she died as a maid in a motel in Florida, right? Like,
Yeah.
like that's how she ended up. Like after writing all this incredible shit, all these incredible books, and she's like,
Yep.
straightening beds in a motel in Florida. Like this is
Yeah.
like it's not that bad for you, right? Like,
That's right. That's right.
yeah,
Your book, I think in the end, in the final analysis, it's tough love, but the key word is, and again, this is me speaking, is love. Love of
yeah,
the craft, love of the form, love of other writers, love of the process, the aspiration. And again, if
yeah.
you continue to do it year after year, there's a reason for that. Even if it's an
That's right.
illusion, there's a
That's
reason
right.
that we put words on the page. Um, Stephen, again, like we were able to fit it in, but I think my takeaway for today, folks, if you are remotely interested in American politics and getting a better, maybe deeper understanding, you've got to check out the Civil War. And if you're a writer or know a writer, this is, believe it or not, is not going to discourage you. It's going to encourage you to do better and try harder and accept the things that are out of your control. Stephen, I really appreciate not only you coming on to drop knowledge and share some conversation. You hung in there through some tech difficulties. I don't know what's going on with
Ah,
that, but we'll blame it on, hey, blame Canada, right? Isn't that the
no,
American
no,
way?
buddy. Blame America now. It's your fault now. Trust me. Like anything that happens, you're getting the blame from here
Fair
for,
enough.
for the foreseeable future.
We will. Fair enough. I'll take that. I'll take the burden. I thank you again, folks. I'll put a lot of information about how to connect with Stephen. Check out his work, buy his books. Thank you for being here, Stephen. Thank you for sharing some of yourself today. Everyone be safe and stay sane, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to Some Things Considered. Find out more, including how to be a guest, at seanmurphy.net. Reminder, we are obsessed with story and celebrating creativity. Also, we're here to advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Drop us a line, get involved, and support our creatives who are the lifeblood of our culture. I'm Sean Murphy. See you on the next episode of Some Things Considered.